Joining me this week is a former candidate for President of the United States from the Libertarian Party and a man who, according to his Twitter bio, is pro-liberty, pro-life, and pro-constitution. Austin Petersen, welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've been trying to do this for quite some time.
Yeah, our
Twitter, it's going to go bonkers.
My people love your people. I don't know if your people are going to like me yet, but I guess that kind of remains to be seen.
I think they're there. I don't know if you've noticed, but there seems to be a classical liberal libertarian little bonding thing happening in America right now.
My people said that if I get you to say you're a small libertarian, then they're going to donate $5 to my super PAC. So is that?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So are you a libertarian?
You can turn some of this on me at some point, but not right at the beginning. Not yet. Not just yet. So it's funny. I'm shooting 3 shows today, and I just walked outside with my dog just to get some fresh air. I just found you wandering in the streets. You didn't even take a car here. You're truly a man of the people.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm from Missouri. Grew up on a farm. Pretty common, you know, and I think that you know, California's beautiful, and you know, we're trying to like be environmentalists, right? So I didn't have a bicycle, so I just went for a walk and found your studio.
Yeah. All right. So here we are. There's a lot I want to get to with you, but let's just start with the basics. Yeah. People know I like definitions. You ran as a libertarian. What is a libertarian to you?
Right. Well, essentially, a libertarian, it allows you to choose your own values, as long as you don't try and use the government to force those values on somebody else. And that's why we get a lot of infighting in the Libertarian Party, because we have so many people from so many different backgrounds with different values. But the one value we all share is that we believe the government should be limited so that individuals can choose what they want to do and choose their values and explore the wide range of options. You know, sometimes those options are dangerous. You know, some people choose to smoke. But they should have the right to do that as long as they don't try and impose a cost onto others, right? And so as soon as you start talking about, you know, what sort of a cost people are imposing on others, that's when government starts to come into the equation. You know, at the most hardcore end of libertarianism, you know, which some say is the true libertarianism, is it's anarchy, anarcho-capitalism. I think I fall right before that. You know, I get off the train right there, and I call myself a minarchist. Essentially, the government should be relegated to very basic rules. They should protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, that may include things like fire, courts, police, military. Otherwise, everything else should be solved by the market.
Yeah, so I had Brian Kaplan from George Mason University, who's an anarcho-capitalist. Anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah,
I always say anarcho for some reason. Yeah, brilliant guy. And we did about an hour and a half. I enjoyed every minute of it. There were moments where I thought, all right, this is a bit much, you know, some private court stuff and some of the pacifism stuff and open border stuff.
Right.
But is that the inherent problem with the Libertarian Party? Not the philosophy, but the party, that this thing's really wide. And when you say I'm a libertarian, people see some of these guys, or some of the, you know, at the convention, the guy running around without a shirt, and some of the more crazy pieces of it.
That was not the worst thing that happened to that convention.
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. But that it's because it's based on the individual, it's hard to get a whole bunch of individually focused people to agree on something.
Right, because essentially you're talking about taking collective action, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of anathema to the Libertarian cause. But I mean, the Libertarian Party is made up of sincere individuals. These people really want limited government. A lot of these people are victims of the state, people that have been harmed, whether they've been persecuted in their communities for doing things like homeschooling, or maybe they want to drink raw milk, right? Maybe they want to have the ability to sell that, right? Amish farmers and things like that. So it's kind of easy to poke fun at the people like the naked guy, but the thing is that the news often doesn't go in and cover the tales of the single mothers who are being harmed because their tax rates are so high that it's hard for them to feed their kids, right? That doesn't make as compelling a news story as the guy who, you know, dances around. So the problem is that, you know, we're missing the forest for the trees in some sense, and there are a lot of sincere, dedicated activists in the Libertarian Party who really just want to. They're not just fighting for their own freedom, and many of them are sincere patriots who are fighting for the freedom of their fellow countrymen, and they just see the two parties as being one and the same in some sense, that their solutions are just more government. Yeah. So that's the kind of the untold story of the heroes of the Libertarian Party, which we don't see very often.
Right, okay, so I want to spend most of our time talking about looking forward, but we do have to look back a little bit here.
Right.
I mean, to me, 2016 was a massive disaster for you guys, because I've said this a zillion times. First off, I voted for Gary, okay? I've had Gary Johnson on the show. The candidacy ultimately was just terrible, and I think if there was ever a year where the Libertarians, or any third, maybe the Greens, whoever, although obviously I agree more with you guys. But if there was ever a year where there was going to be a mark made, not the presidency, but a mark to be made, this was it. There was so much disgust with Trump and Clinton. What happened?
Well, I'll tell you, this topic, I mean, this turns me into Salt Bay. Like, I got salt, like, I could drop it right here. Yeah. But,
don't you usually walk around with a musket? Couldn't there be?
The flintlock, right, yeah. Oh, boy, you're going to get my hackles up. All right, so it's very difficult to be in this situation where, in the position of having tried to stop that, right, having kind of seen it, there's nothing more frustrating, and I think a lot of libertarians see this in so many other ways on society as a whole, where we see things kind of rushing toward a cliff and you're screaming, stop, and people, if you're going to tell people the truth, you better make them laugh or else they'll kill you. And that's happening in society, but with the Libertarian Party, there were so many times when the incompetence was being displayed pre-primary, and people either weren't paying attention or they were applauding it. I mean, there's videos of some of the gaffes and stumbles that went on before the convention, and I don't think there's any excuse. I mean, the people who take responsibility for what it was need to take responsibility because they had every opportunity to try and stop it, and they sort of cheered it on. But you know, the Libertarian Party has a lot of the same problems that the major two-party has, with cults of personality and things like that, with none of the upsides of actually winning elections. So that's the problems of fighting in a third party. But
is there a bigger issue here, which is that, forgetting the specific stumbles that Gary made once he got the nomination, and again, I like him as a person, I think he's a decent guy, and I hope he'll come back here and I'd be happy to discuss all this stuff with him. But is that the bigger issue? The only time anyone ever talked about the Libertarians was when he either made a gaffe or when the naked guy ran around. Beyond that, there was virtually no coverage. So it was almost as if you had to do outlandish things. So I watched the Libertarian debates, and I thought they needed to say more crazy things if anyone was going to pay attention. Even though I don't believe that generally related to politics.
Well, it's not about what you say; it's about how you say it very frequently, right? And so sometimes it was just Gary's delivery that came off as awkward. It wasn't necessarily what he was saying, but the way that he was saying it, which I think puts people off. And the thing about Donald Trump that I think was so attractive was that he was giving. Last year was a crazy bastard year, right? and libertarians as crazy bastards, that could have been our year. And with the rise of the alt-right, which is really what propelled, in many ways, helped propel Donald to the presidency. A lot of those people, were sincere conservatives who were looking for a third option. They wanted somebody who could take down Hillary, and I think that the real strategy problem was simply that it looked as if Gary and Bill were sort of cozying up to Hillary, which is what nobody in the United States wanted because they rejected her. So it wasn't so much what Gary was saying, it relied a little bit more on tactics. I mean, yeah, the delivery was not that good, but and the gaffes were horrible, but it really just comes down to not being able to read the political winds of the time, and that's really where we suffered.
Yeah, without getting too thick in the weeds on just the machinations behind the scene of the party, because I don't think people really understand what happens behind a party. So we know the Democrats have this massive machine. We know it's deeply corrupt, and a lot of that has been exposed. The Republicans also have a pretty powerful machine. I don't think it's quite as corrupt, but who knows? What is the underpinnings of the libertarian machine? Like, what's going on behind the scenes? Who's in charge? What's it about?
Anarchy, right? Yeah. So I mean, they have the Libertarian National Committee. Their job is to run candidates for office. I think the good thing about the Libertarian Party is that, anybody can participate, right? It's not like the Democrats where they have super delegates and things like that. Anybody can become a delegate if you join the Libertarian Party and go to your state convention. So the way that the Libertarian Party works is it's powered by the people. Right? There isn't, some shadowy Koch money. The Koch brothers left years ago. So it's really just powered by the activists and the people who want to try and see these ideas be put into public policy. Now, there are some people who actually, they caucus with the party, but they don't want the party to actually win elections for multitudes of reasons. One being perhaps that they think that there will be a system-wide collapse and libertarians will get blamed for it if there was a libertarian president. And another one is that they think that the party should be educational. So you've got all these different factions in the party, and some of them are sincere, committed activists who really want to bring about change. But when it comes to the machinations, it's what you see for the most part is what you get. I mean, there are some backroom dealings and things that go on, and there's a lot of pressure and hassling that goes on at the convention. People are like, endorse Bill Weld, we'll give you the world. Right? It's like that story in the Bible where like they take Jesus and Satan is like, if you will bow before me. And I was like, no, Bill Weld. But that kind of stuff happens. But for the most part, it's what you see is what you get.
Yeah. Was there a moment after Gary got the nomination that you would have considered being his VP? Or did they announce, once he got the nomination, did they say they were a team immediately?
Well, of course, he was running to be the VP. And the thing was this, my mistakes that I made at the convention was that I actually took the principled moves over the pragmatic moves. And I'll just explain this very briefly. So there was a brief period of time when some people said, okay, Austin, if you want, just go run for the VP slot. But because I was trying to think for what the good of the party and for the good of the ticket, I thought to myself, okay, well, Gary hates me, and I wouldn't want to be hamstrung by a VP that I can't stand. Right? He obviously wanted Bill. The delegates thought that he was better, so I was trying to, I gave in to the will of the majority, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do this because I think it's going to cripple the ticket. Well, then later, stupidly, I didn't realize that Gary had threatened that if he didn't get Bill Weld, he would quit. So if I had been the VP, then I would have been the candidate if Gary had quit. So maybe I should have just stuck it together.
Well, I suspect he wouldn't have chose you, though, right?
No, but the delegates choose. That's how the Libertarian Party is different from the major two parties. The delegates choose the vice presidential candidate. So if I really wanted to be a butt chunk, I could have taken my gun out of the trash and mounted a campaign to try and be the VP pick with the hopes that Gary would quit. But that's just being a jerk. So
yeah.
I already have been labeled a jerk, so I'm trying to get away from that.
So my last question to you at the end of this is going to be about 2020, but as a lead into that, then, you learned that lesson there. So do you think you would do things differently next time, before you even tell me if 2020 is an option?
Yes, I would definitely do things differently. And there are certain things that you learn from the process. Hindsight is 2020. But I think that tactically I made some mistakes. But from a principled perspective, I did everything right. Raised money the grassroots way, online, just doing live streams and going around the country. I think we raised $120,000. So in a lot of ways, my campaign pioneered many of the campaigns in the future for people who have no power, right? People who are grassroots, who can come out of nowhere. I think I showed that people who are sincere, committed activists can do that. Yeah. So there are some things that I would do differently, but most of it's just sort of parliamentary kind of procedure things.
Yeah. How much for you as an outsider running on an outsider ticket was about raising money? Because that, to me, is the root of all the problems right now.
Well, you know what the funny thing was that I found about raising money is that when things are good and you're happy and like you're doing well, people will send you money, but there's nothing that raises money like controversy. And one thing that happened to me, and it's so ironic because I was just their keynote speaker this year now, the Colorado Libertarian Party disinvited me from their debate. And I was in Illinois at the time, and I'm there with my staff, and they said, okay, well, you're not invited because I disagree with some of the radical anarchists on one of their base philosophical principles. So they're like, oh, you're not a libertarian, you're not invited.
Yeah. What principle is that?
It's called the NAP, the NAP, the non-aggression principle, which many libertarians believe that is the centerpiece of libertarian philosophy, which I, in no uncertain terms, completely reject, simply because in my mind, I believe it leads one to a strict form of pacifism, which doesn't account for self-defense, which they dispute. But aggression being a sort of a term that can be broadly used in many ways, like what do you define as aggression? It leads one to consider maybe we'll need a court system to suss it out, which would imply a government, which would end the argument for anarchy, right? They disagree, and they're going to be very mad at me for saying that. But
so you're taking in that specific instance what you would argue is just a more realistic approach, or a more functional approach.
Not really. It's not a matter of realism. Essentially, it's a matter of real, true principle. Yeah. Simply because many people have argued, and boy, this is going to make people mad. But in the end, the concept of
Don't worry,
aggression,
we're putting this on YouTube, and it's not like YouTube commenters are anything but lovely
maybe
people.
Your liberal friends are going to like it, but I'm kind of a heretic in libertarian circles for this.
Yeah.
But simply, many libertarians have argued, and many have told me directly to my face that the evil of government is so horrible that it's better that we have a society where it may be immoral to allow a child to starve to death, but it's not illegal simply because it's all about the initiation of force. Right, and I like to play the puzzle game. If you walk past a homeless person on the street, they're starving to death, and you don't feed them, have you committed a crime? No. Have you initiated force? No. If you have a child and it's your child and by neglect you allow that child to starve to death, have you committed a crime? Yes. Have you initiated force? No. So that's really where it comes down to it. The rights of children is sort of where we start talking about whether or not some third party may have a right to come in. But that controversy was enough to make the Libertarian Party of Colorado say no, and it made my activists so angry that they started pouring money in my coffers saying, Austin, drive to Colorado right now. And we drove all night, 13 hours straight to the convention, took second place, you know, beat up on Gary a little bit, and raised money. So
yeah. That's fascinating because the infighting of all the parties I find incredible. Like just the inability for anyone to build a bridge these days, which is so much of what I'm not a political insider, but what I'm trying to do around here is build some bridges and show people you can disagree on abortion, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and a bunch of different things, and still find some basic principles to believe in. But let's just talk about the general role of government, because that's really what this all comes down to. So you touched on it just a little bit up top. Give me the basic things that you believe government should exist for, the specifics, not just the ideas of liberty and that sort of thing.
Right, so the libertarianism isn't really about government; it's about self-government. So it's the concept that if you have a moral, just society, then people should be self-governed, so it's different from the sort of FDR definition of freedom, because FDR and the Social Democrats believe that freedom means freedom from want. So you're not free if you're hungry. That's their definition. So the question really comes down to is that we as libertarians have a different concept of freedom from most people, because our concept of freedom is the most politically incorrect, because it requires personal responsibility. And when you start talking to people about personal responsibility, that's when they get angry. Because and even libertarians aren't perfect when it comes down to this. But when it comes to the actual role of government, it should be the absolute minimum that is required in order to sustain life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now that's the Declaration of Independence. That's not the law. But the Constitution, being the law, it has very specific enumerated powers. And sometimes conservatives, I think, make a mistake where they'll say, well, we believe in states' rights. And the libertarian says, no, actually, that's a misnomer. Only people have rights. You know, states have powers. And the idea is that those powers should be strictly limited and enumerated. So we delegate some of our power to government, but we don't delegate any of our rights to government. Our rights are intrinsic, our rights are natural, they are self-evident as to our humanity, and so libertarians simply believe that the individual should be self-governed to the greatest extent possible until that self-governance is a problem, right? If you do not police yourself, you will be policed. So as long as whatever action that you're taking isn't creating some negative externality on the community, in that question, when it comes to the environment, right, whether you may be polluting or something like that, these are problems that libertarians face. Yeah. We believe in a strict definition of property rights. So essentially what government should do is it should adjudicate disputes between property rights holders, and it should prosecute criminal cases. Force and fraud really is what it should do, and that's really the limited role of government. So
you would take like sanitation away from the government. You would take the U.S. Postal Service. All of those kinds of things. We're keeping courts. Yeah. We're keeping cops. And
probably need nuclear weapons, in my opinion. But that's
cops, courts, nukes.
Yeah, cops, courts, and nukes is about all.
Well, I think we just came up with your slogan for 2020. There we go.
Save me, please.
Yeah. How is any of this different? Do you consider yourself an objectivist, actually?
I mean, I flirt with objectivism. Now
I'm going to really get you in trouble because I know you just mentioned Ayn Rand. People go nuts. I like a lot of it, and I've had many people, your own Brooke, his book's right over there.
Right. I think that she rejects altruism. I get a joy out of doing something. I know the argument is that, well, if you get a joy out of doing it for other good people, well, then it's selfish. But it's not entirely selfish. I mean, I think that that there is a desire for us to sacrifice ourselves in order to do it for the greater good. Some people think that the government should require that sacrifice on us, like mandatory service. But as a libertarian, I believe in voluntary service, a voluntary military. And if I had served in the military, I would be doing it out of a sense of patriotism, which would be, in some sense, a sense of selflessness. Many people have been drafted, right? But a lot of people who fought in World War II against the Nazis were doing it because they were fighting for their family. They were fighting operating out of a greater sense of oneself. I mean, sometimes libertarians, I think objectivists are sort of immune to that, but not all libertarians are. Some libertarians do what they do out of a sense of what's good for the community. Maybe this is what Ayn Rand would say was selfish, but I actually do want to see humanity flourish and thrive. I just simply don't believe the government is the best way for us to do that.
Yeah, so I don't see actually a major distinction there from what you would believe as opposed to an objectivist, because doing for yourself what is selfishly good, I always view that as that's not necessarily going to hurt your neighbor, because if you're smart and you're doing what's good for you, you're not going to be dumping in your neighbor's lawn because you want your neighbor to be happy too.
True,
so
but like sometimes don't you just do good things for people, even if though it doesn't benefit you? I mean, yeah, it may make you feel good, but every once in a while I catch myself just doing things for people, like opening a door, handing a quarter to a homeless person, right? Giving somebody my phone to use or something like that. Just not big, and like sometimes I don't derive any pleasure from it. I just do it automatically.
Right. So then we're on the philosophical piece of is that somehow actually for you, which it almost, to me it's almost irrelevant in a sort of real world practicality.
Probably my biggest issue with like objectivists is just simply the again that it's distasteful to me because I really dislike cults of personality, right? And I'm a contrarian and a skeptic, and I just really like to pick things apart, find the flaws in it. You know, this is what gets you in trouble and gets you branded a heretic. But you know, when you find flaws and you want to pull the thread, eventually the sweater comes apart. Just because I like to see what things are made of, right? And I don't like to accept things just because this Murray Rothbard said it, or Ayn Rand said it, right, or Ron Paul said it, and you know, now I just angered everybody else in the libertarian movement.
I normally don't have a list of people to anger, but I feel like I should have had a little, Glenn Beck whiteboard here, and I could just write down.
We could just knock it on. We haven't hit feminists or SJWs yet.
Patience. We'll get there.